My roommate secretly kept a raccoon in our apartment, and it almost burned the whole building down. When you're 31, and your browser autofills apartments under 1,000 near me, every time you type the letter I, you start telling yourself little stories so you can fall asleep. Mine went like this. Roommates aren't that bad. Craigslist isn't that cursed. And people who call themselves low maintenance in roommate ads aren't actually chaotic gremlins with a Venmo account. Enter Derek. He had the perfect roommate interview. Wore a clean flannel, brought his own pen to sign the sublease, talked about composting like it was a religion, and he was the chillest missionary. He said he worked as an evening shift bartender for the vibes, but did DoorDash for the money, which is the kind of sentence that should have set off 100 alarms in my brain. Instead, I heard, works nights quiet days, and pays rent I won't die. Our apartment sits on the second floor of one of those pale, tired buildings that look like they were built by the same company that manufactures saltines. Cream walls, mystery carpet, a kitchen that hums like it's powering a submarine. The oven clock blinks 12 volts in quiet protest, no matter how many times you set it. There's a balcony that technically exists, but sags in a way that suggests it doesn't want to. Still, it's 5 blocks from a decent grocery store and a taco truck that knows my order, so I had made peace with it. The lease was very clear. No pets. The landlord, Greg, a man who introduces himself as Gregory, but Greg is fine, which tells you everything, lives on the first floor and polices the building with the energy of a mall Santa who didn't make the cut. No pets, no grills, no candles, no fun. Honestly, I didn't care. I'm allergic to most things with fur and responsibility. For the first few weeks, Derek was a dream. Rent? On time. Dishes? Done-ish. He bought a Costco tower of toilet paper that made me believe in angels. He labeled his shelf in the fridge and didn't cross the line. We negotiated thermostat politics like diplomats. I let myself exhale. Then the clues started. At first it was a smell. Not the normal guy house scent of gym socks and stale coffee, but an earthy, damp kind of musk that drifted in and out like a weird radio station. I scrubbed the sink. I bleached the trash can. I Febrezed the couch so hard the cushions squeaked when you sat. Still musk. Noises came next. Soft scratching, like a pencil on paper, somewhere behind the drywall. I did the thing you do in old buildings and said, pipes. The noises didn't believe me. They moved. Kitchen one day, hallway the next. The pattern made my skin itch. One night I came home late after a disaster of a first date, the kind where you learn a stranger's political opinions before their last name, and found the pantry doors half open. Nothing wild. Except my bread was on the floor. A clean, perfect bite taken out of the crust. I'm talking single bite evidence, like a cartoon raccoon came in, clocked out, and left a calling card. Dude, did you drop my bread? I asked the next morning. Derek blinked like an NPC, loading a new dialogue tree. Oh yeah, I was making a sandwich. Must have slipped. Okay, fine. One time, moving on. Except the little things kept stacking. The flour had a weird trail in it one morning, like tiny fingers had scored a line through it. I had a memory of a YouTube video where someone used flour to catch a mouse's footprints, and it dug into my brain like a bad song. Later that week, I opened the fridge and saw a cleanly gnawed corner on a block of cheddar. Not cut, not torn, gnawed. I didn't touch your cheese, Derek said, which is exactly what a person who touched your cheese would say. He told me maybe the fridge was too cold, and it cracked. Our fridge, a machine that actively sweats from effort, cracking cheese from cold? Sure, man. I did what any reasonable adult does when the universe presents a weird puzzle. I pretended it wasn't happening. I buried myself in work, told myself the smell was the building, that the scratching was the vents, and that the cheese had somehow died of natural causes. But the clue that nearly slapped me in the face was the package. I work from home in software sales, which is 60 Zoom, 30 email, and 10 looking at my own face, and wondering if this is what aging feels like. So I catch a lot of packages for the building. Amazon boxes, chewy bags, random padded mailers with names I don't recognize. One afternoon, I get the "A package has been delivered" notification. Peek outside, and there it is. A medium brown box addressed to Derek. The label says, Exotic Nutrition, Marion, Illinois. The return address looks official adjacent, like a place that sells things you can't buy at Petco. I bring it in and put it on the counter. Derek usually grabs his packages immediately. He doesn't. It sits there like a loaded question. When he finally comes home, he scoops it up and walks straight to his room without making eye contact. The box gives a little clink, like glass touching glass. 2 hours later, the apartment smells like sweet corn syrup, not like someone cooked it, like someone opened a bag of something syrupy. I walk to the kitchen. The trash is freshly tied up, already replaced with a new bag, like Derek was speed-running chores. On top of the tied trash bag is a sliver of cardboard that reads, "Baby animal formula, high-calorie supplement." Nope, absolutely not. My stomach does a little elevator drop. I knock on Derek's door. There's a scrabbling sound on the other side, like someone rearranging IKEA furniture with their feet. Then silence. Then his voice, too casual. "Yeah?" I ask if he got a new job in wildlife rehab. He laughs. Says it was just supplements for a friend's dog. He is not friends with a dog. He is friends with lift surge pricing and bar regulars who call him big guy. But I don't push it. I tell myself it's fine. I tell myself I'm tired. I tell myself there is no way, zero, that this man would hide a pet in an apartment with the landlord downstairs and a lease that has "no pets" written in caps like a scream. I tell myself a lot of things. None of them are true. I don't know when it clicked that I was living inside a slow-burn farce. Maybe it was when I found a bowl in the bathtub. Not a cereal bowl. A stainless steel mixing bowl, half full of water, sitting dead center like a minimalist art installation, titled, "Derek has a secret he will die for." I stared at it for a full minute, trying to invent a universe where this was normal. Maybe he was soaking. A shower cap. Maybe it was. Percussion practice? Then I noticed the hairs. Not long human ones. Short, coarse little whisker wires clinging to the sides. I rinsed the bowl, washed my hands like I'd been cursed, and put the bowl back in the cabinet. I told myself derealization is a phase, and I was going to power walk through it. The next thing I did was a little crazy, I'll admit. I bought a cheap baby monitor on Facebook Marketplace. The lady selling it said her toddler had aged out of electronic surveillance, which, honestly, goals. I pointed the camera down our hallway so I could catch the kitchen and the laundry closet, the two places I kept hearing the scritches. I angled it to keep Derek's door out of frame because I'm nosy, not feral. I set the motion alert to scream at me anytime a dust mote moves, and waited. At 2:43 a.m., my phone pinged. I rolled over, bleary, and watched a grainy figure in a hoodie shuffle from Derek's room to the kitchen. He moved like he was sneaking past landmines. He opened the pantry. He pulled out a bag of mini marshmallows. He grabbed the mixing bowl from the cabinet. He opened the fridge. He poured milk into the bowl like he was feeding a cartoon. He set the bowl on the floor. He scattered marshmallows like confetti. And then he kneeled beside it and made the softest pss noise a human mouth can produce. Nothing appeared on camera, but I didn't need the footage to tell me what happened. 5 minutes later, he scooped up the bowl and slipped back into his room. I paused the video on his hand. There were little crescent scratches along his knuckles, the kind you get from tiny paws that don't know where you end and playtime begins. I didn't sleep. I lay there listing illegal pets in Ohio like I was studying for a quiz I didn't want to pass. Ferret? Legal. Sugar glider? Legal with paperwork. Hedgehog? Legal. Raccoon? That's a weird one wild animal territory. Laws on rehabilitation. Probably illegal to keep as a pet. Definitely illegal in an apartment where my oven can't even commit to keeping time. My heart did a bass drop every time I imagined a ringed tail scooting along our hallway. The next morning, I tried a different strategy. Conversation. I told Derek that our lease says no pets, and if he was even entertaining the idea of a goldfish, he needed to clear it with me first. He nodded the way people nod when you're talking about tax codes. He said I was overthinking it. He said he had friends who stayed over sometimes with dogs and cats, and maybe the smell was their laundry, the kind of answer that sounds like something until you try to hold it. Meanwhile, the evidence kept multiplying like rodents. I opened the linen closet and found a bag of puppy pads, the big quilted ones they use for housebreaking. I found a chew toy under the couch that wasn't a dog toy, but looked like it wanted to be. A knot of rope gnawed to sadness. Once I came home and heard the shower running in his bathroom. Later, I discovered the tub was full of dirt. Not mud. Dirt. As if someone had soaked a plant, or a creature that loves to dig. I developed small, targeted obsessions. I wiped the pantry shelves and then checked them for tiny footprints, like a supervillain. I dusted the baseboards with baby powder to catch tracks. I taped a strip of blue painter's tape over the bottom of Derek's door and checked it for hair. This is how you become a person you don't recognize. You start auditing your own home like an unpaid intern for Animal Planet. To distract myself, I tried dating again. It did not help. One Saturday, I met a girl for coffee who brought her emotional support chihuahua, which I respected, until the chihuahua relieved its emotions onto my shoe. Another time, I went to a trivia night, accidentally joined a team of bachelorette party strangers, and spent 2 hours being called Bradley Cooper Light while we lost to a group named Quiztiama Aguilera. I came home at midnight that night, opened the fridge, and found my leftover tacos gone. The foil was carefully folded back into place like a tiny pillowcase. It wasn't just the theft, it was the precision, the delicate removal of meat, the untouched lime wedges, the silent closing of the fridge. It felt like a ghost with greasy fingers lived with us. The neighbors started noticing things too. Mrs. Harding in 2C, who has lived in the building since DVDs were a thing, cornered me by the mailboxes to say she'd heard odd skittering on the stairs late at night. Greg the landlord slipped a note under our door, reminding everyone that wildlife is to remain outdoors, which felt like a subtweet from a man wearing socks with sandals. I wanted it to be a ferret, something at least adjacent to normal. I even Googled ferret smell at work and had to clear my search history in case IT ever audits weirdness. But ferrets don't leave little handprints in flour. They don't open foil like surgeons. And the bowl in the bathtub wasn't a ferret problem. It was a Dexter for woodland creatures problem. The baby monitor caught one more crucial moment. A package arrives. Derek brings it straight to his room. A minute later, he comes back out carrying a plastic tote with air holes melted into the lid. He moves quickly, holding it like it contains a beating heart. He disappears into his room. The door shuts. The scratching on the monitor that night isn't soft anymore. It's enthusiastic. It's a drum solo in tiny gloves. My curiosity wrestled with my self-preservation. On the one hand, I did not want to open his door and meet the thing that had been eating my cheddar. On the other hand, I couldn't keep pretending that my roommate had not turned his bedroom into a secret wildlife center. The decision was made for me by a smell so intense it might have had its own driver's license. A week later, I came home from the grocery store and stopped dead in the hallway. The air was humid and sweet-sour, like hot apples left in a gym bag. The smell got stronger as I stood outside Derek's door. Something rustled. The doorknob clicked, just once, like a courtesy. I knocked. No answer. I texted him, "Everything okay?" He replied a minute later, "At work." Why? I cracked the door, half expecting a SWAT team to descend from the ceiling, asking me if I had a warrant. What I saw made my brain reboot. Derek's room looked like someone Googled DIY pet enclosure, and then was interrupted by a tornado. Clothes were stacked in uneven geology layers around the bed. The window was open an inch, with a towel jammed in it like a muffler. In the corner, under a leaning tower of Red Bull cases and a garment rack holding exactly one tuxedo jacket, sat a wired dog crate. It was covered with a moving blanket. Heat rippled off it like summer on asphalt. Something inside huffed. I pulled the blanket back just enough to see. 2 round eyes blinked at me from the gloom. They were not rodent eyes. They were bright and clever and edged with little black burglars' masks. A paw hand, really, with long, clever fingers, reached up and hooked the wire like it was asking for a handshake. The animal sniffed, twitched, and made a soft churring noise that landed somewhere between cute and "I will reorder your pantry." It was a raccoon, a small one, maybe adolescent, with a fluffy ringed tail coiled around itself like a question mark. It sat on an old hoodie, like it paid rent. In the back of the crate, there was a metal bowl, a heap of dog kibble, a handful of mini marshmallows, and because the universe has a sense of humor, a shiny golf ball. My brain did that thing where it tries to find other explanations. Perhaps this was a raccoon-shaped dog. Maybe I was concussed. Maybe this was a prank show, and I was moments from meeting a host in a neon blazer. The raccoon solved that by sticking an entire paw through the bars and patting my sneaker. Like, "Hello, sir. Where's the room service?" I eased the blanket back. The heat lamp clipped to the crate side turned the air into soup. The outlet was carrying a criminal amount of responsibility. Lamp, fan, and a plug-in air freshener, all feeding off a single orange extension cord that ran under a rug and disappeared beneath the bed. Next to the crate was an open tub of something labeled Oxbow Carnivore Care, a syringe with a suspicious film on it, and a handwritten schedule. Feed 6 a.m. noon, 6 p.m. midnight. Clean 7 p.m. Enrich? Enrich had 3 question marks, which is both honest and deranged. On the dresser sat the exotic nutrition box, now open and half empty. Inside, baby animal formula, syringes, a bag of dried mealworms, and a pamphlet about bonding with your exotic. The cover featured a sugar glider wearing a tiny sweater, like a threat. I backed out of the room and closed the door quietly, as if noise would convert the raccoon into a bear. I stood in the hallway, checked the time, and realized I had 30 minutes before Derek's usual break between DoorDash and the bar shift. I did the adult, least compliant thing. I called the landlord. Greg answered on the second ring, sounding like a man who gets to yell, "I told you so," for dessert. I told him there was a wild animal in our apartment. He asked me to define wild. I said, striped tail, mask, tiny burglar hands. He went quiet, then said he was coming up. Greg arrived in less than a minute, because of course he did. He lives under us like a disgruntled mushroom. He knocked with his whole palm like the door owed him money. I opened. He stepped into the hallway, sniffed, made a face like he tasted a lemon, and said, "Show me." We opened Derek's door together. Greg stopped at the threshold like there was an invisible fence for landlords. The raccoon was now sitting up, very alert, paws pressed together like an evil mastermind in a Disney movie. Greg whispered, "Good Lord," and crossed himself, which I did not know was in his toolkit. He asked me how long it had been here. I said I didn't know. He asked me what it ate. I gestured vaguely at the marshmallows like a person indicating a suspect lineup. He asked me if it had a name. I said I hoped not, because names become grief. That was when the front door opened. Derek froze in the hallway like a kid who just found his parents reading his search history. He took in Greg, then me, then the open bedroom door, and finally the raccoon, who perked up like a dog greeting its owner. Derek said one word, a prayer and a swear combined. Dude. What followed wasn't a conversation so much as a slow-motion landslide. Derek insisted it was temporary. He insisted it was a rescue. He insisted he was saving it from a bad situation. He insisted it was house-trained, which the tiny poop behind his desk disputed. He insisted he had it under control. Under control was doing a lot of heavy lifting for a setup that looked like a heat lamp away from purgatory. Greg, to his credit, did not explode. He shifted into the precise, soothing tone of a man who has had to evict someone on Christmas and doesn't want to repeat that chapter of his memoir. He told Derek this was a lease violation. He told him the animal had to go. Derek asked where. Greg said, a wildlife rehabilitator, an actual one, and gave him a number written on a folded business card. The card had a raccoon silhouette on it, which suggests Greg has been waiting for this day like a doomsday prepper. Derek sulked. He promised to make calls. He promised the raccoon, which he admitted was named Mr. Peanut, would be gone by the weekend. I stood there, frustrated, but relieved, like someone had yanked a splinter the length of a pencil out of my brain. The crate hummed with heat. Mr. Peanut washed his face with his paws and looked at me like I was in trouble with him personally. If the story ended there, I wouldn't be writing this. I'd be bragging about standing my ground, about confronting nonsense without yelling, about being the adultiest adult in adult town. But the universe hates tidy endings, and raccoons hate being bored. We had 3 days until the weekend. We didn't make it to tomorrow. I went to bed that night telling myself the problem was solved. Greg the landlord had spoken, Derek had promised, and Mr. Peanut's career as our illegal roommate was ending. All I had to do was survive a few more days without losing any more tacos or cheese. Easy, right? Nope. At 3:17 a.m., my smoke alarm shrieked like a banshee. I shot out of bed, heart racing, adrenaline instantly converting me into the worst version of a firefighter. Barefoot, shirtless, holding a single slipper as a weapon. The apartment was hazy, not thick black smoke, but a ghostly veil that made the hall light look like it was underwater. My brain did the math. Haze smolder, something's already burning. The smell hit me. Burnt plastic mixed with caramelized sugar. I turned the corner into the hallway and saw it. A faint glow leaking out from under Derek's door. I pounded on it. No answer. I yanked it open. Chaos. The crate was on its side, heat lamp dangling by its cord like a noose. Mr. Peanut had apparently staged a midnight prison break, flipped the whole operation, and knocked the lamp directly into a pile of Red Bull boxes. The cardboard was blackened and curling, smoke streaming upward. The extension cord rug setup? Yeah, that was sparking like a 4th of July discount firework. Derek was dead asleep, sprawled face down across his mattress like a crime scene chalk outline. Meanwhile, Mr. Peanut was on the dresser, tail puffed, gnawing a marshmallow like the world's tiniest arsonist, enjoying a victory snack. I yelled his name. He snored. The fire hissed. I grabbed the lamp cord and yanked it out of the wall. Sparks died. Smoke billowed. I stomped on the smoldering boxes until my heel felt like it might melt. The smoke alarm screamed overhead, joined by Greg banging on our front door. Derek finally stirred, rolled over, and said, "Huh?" Like he was waking from a Disney nap. I shouted that his raccoon almost burned the building down. He blinked at me with the confused innocence of a child being told recess was canceled. By the time Greg let himself in with his spare key, I had the lamp unplugged, the boxes spread across the floor, and a raccoon chittering on top of a dresser like a supervillain about to monologue. Greg did not yell. He just sighed the sigh of a man whose rent money will never be worth this. He pulled his phone, dialed 3 numbers, and said, "Yeah, we need the fire department. And maybe animal control." The firefighters arrived 6 minutes later, which felt like 6 hours of standing in smoky underwear, while a raccoon tried to escape through the curtains. Neighbors gathered outside, sleepy-eyed in their pajamas. Mrs. Harding had curlers in and looked thrilled that the gossip gods had finally blessed her. The firefighters stomped through in full gear, fans blasting smoke out the windows, radios crackling. One guy looked at the tipped crate, looked at Mr. Peanut now attempting to hide behind the TV, and muttered, "Jesus Christ, is that a raccoon?" Like he'd just discovered Atlantis. They asked if anyone was hurt. No. They asked if the animal was vaccinated. Derek said, which is firefighter for problem. They asked if we had an extinguisher. I gestured helplessly at my one slipper, which probably did not meet code. Animal control showed up in a van so dented it looked like it had survived raccoon revenge already. A woman in thick gloves coaxed Mr. Peanut into a cage with what looked like a single Cheeto puff. He went willingly, which honestly hurt my feelings. So much for loyalty. As they carried him out, Derek looked devastated, like someone was repossessing his emotional support Netflix password. The raccoon chittered once, locked eyes with me, and then disappeared into the night, leaving behind a room that smelled like marshmallows, melted plastic, and regret. The firemen packed up. The crowd dispersed. Greg, still calm but vibrating with landlord rage, told Derek to pack his things. Not this week, not when you can. Now. By dawn, Derek was gone. His stuff piled into the back of his Toyota like a bad garage sale. The scorch mark on the carpet stayed. The smell lingered. And I sat on the couch with a cold cup of coffee, wondering if Craigslist should be classified as a weapon. The following week was a blur of apologies and Febreze. Greg had a contractor replace the carpet. He sent me an invoice labeled fire-adjacent damages, which feels like a band name. Insurance adjusters came by, took pictures, and left muttering about unauthorized wildlife. The neighbors treated me like a minor celebrity. Mrs. Harding called me the brave one. A guy in 3B slapped me on the back and said, "At least it wasn't bed bugs." Someone slid a note under my door that just said, "Rip Mr. Peanut," in Sharpie. I tried explaining to friends. It always sounded fake. My roommate hit a raccoon. It almost set our apartment on fire. Firefighters came. Then animal control baited it with a Cheeto. People laughed, shook their heads, and asked if I was writing a screenplay. I wished I was. Life slowly went back to normal. I enjoyed silence. My food stayed mine. My flour stayed footprint-free. I slept without listening for scritches. But sometimes, when the fridge groaned at night, I half expected to hear little paws following it. Derek texted me once, weeks later. A single message. "Do you think they'll let me visit him?" I didn't reply. Don't find your roommates on Craigslist. Don't ignore weird smells. And if your roommate says he's low maintenance, check under his bed for Mr. Peanut. If you've never had to explain, my roommate illegally kept a raccoon that nearly set our apartment on fire to an insurance adjuster, I envy you. I sat across from a man in a wrinkled shirt, his tie already loosened at 10 a.m., while he flipped through forms like he was speedrunning paperwork. "So, Cause of incident? He asked. I pointed at the box labeled Other and wrote, Raccoon plus heat lamp. He looked up, pen frozen. Raccoon? I nodded. He tapped the paper, like maybe if he poked it enough times, the story would change. Domesticated? Nope. Authorized pet? Not even a little. He sighed, scribbled something that looked like denied, and muttered, God, I hate this job. The process dragged on for weeks. They wanted photos, receipts, timelines. I kept emailing attachments with subject lines, like evidence of illegal raccoon activity and carpet scorch mark. JPEG. Somewhere in an office server, there's now a file with my name and 27 pictures of melted Red Bull boxes. Greg the landlord wasn't much better. He acted like I had personally invited Mr. Peanut to crash rent-free. Every time I saw him, he'd shake his head and mumble, never in 30 years. Which was impressive, because Greg once told me about the tenant who turned a bathtub into a beer cooler for frat parties. Apparently, raccoon arson trumps tub keggers. He billed me for half the replacement carpet, even though Derek had technically been the culprit. His logic: you lived there too, so you're complicit in raccoon harboring? I considered lawyering up, but the thought of sitting in a courtroom while a judge asked me to define complicit raccoon harboring made me want to throw myself into traffic. I paid. Meanwhile, the apartment itself never fully recovered. No matter how much Febreze, baking soda, or scented candles I deployed, there was always a faint marshmallow and musk note in the air. Friends would come over, sniff, and ask, "What's that smell?" And I'd have to either lie or say, "Oh, that's just raccoon residue." Neither answer inspired confidence. Neighbors didn't let it go either. Every time I bumped into Mrs. Harding in the hallway, she'd ask, "Any new critters?" Like she was the raccoon paparazzi. Someone taped a photo of a raccoon in sunglasses to our building's bulletin board, with the caption, "Wanted, Mr. Peanut, arsonist at large." For 2 solid months, my life was a meme. The kicker? I got a letter in the mail from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Apparently, Greg had reported the incident, because of course he did. And they now had my name in some database under wildlife incident. The letter didn't accuse me of anything, but it was worded like they were watching me. Congratulations to me. I'm now on some government raccoon list. Remember how I was half-heartedly dating during all this? Yeah. Try explaining the raccoon saga on a first date. One girl asked me about my worst roommate ever. I told the story in what I thought was a funny, self-deprecating way. She laughed at first. Then she got quiet. Then she said, "Wait, you mean an actual raccoon lived in your apartment?" "Yes." "And you stayed there?" "Yes." She blinked. "So you basically lived in a dumpster with Wi-Fi?" I never saw her again. Another date thought it was hilarious, at least until she asked if the raccoon was still alive. I admitted I had no idea what happened to Mr. Peanut after animal control took him. She gasped like I'd confessed to murder. She spent the rest of the evening scrolling through raccoon rescue Instagram accounts and showing me pictures, demanding, "Was it this one?" I didn't get a second date there either. Eventually, I stopped bringing it up. But gossip has legs. My friends started calling me Rocket after the raccoon from Guardians of the Galaxy. My coworkers bought me a novelty raccoon mug for my birthday. Even my mom, when I told her, said, "Well, honey, you always liked animals." Like this was some kind of repressed personality trait blossoming in disaster. The worst part? Derek texted me again. Out of nowhere, weeks after vanishing. "Hey man, just checking in. How's the apartment? Any news about Peanut?" Peanut. Not even Mr. Peanut anymore. Like they were on a first-name basis. Like he was texting me about a dude from our fantasy football league. I didn't reply. Life eventually returned to its boring baseline. New roommate, a grad student who collects succulents, bless him. No fires, no marshmallows mysteriously missing. My fridge is safe. My flour is footprint-free. But sometimes, when I'm taking the trash out at night, I'll hear a rustle in the alley, a clang of a dumpster lid, a pair of glowing eyes in the dark, and for one split second, I swear I see him. Masked, ring-tailed, watching, plotting. I whisper, "Not tonight, Peanut." Because some ghosts don't haunt houses, they haunt leases. So after paying half the carpet replacement and buying enough Febreze to fumigate a stadium, I did what every dumb millennial thinks is smart when screwed over. I Googled small claims court. The logic seemed flawless in my raccoon-traumatized brain. Derek caused the problem. Derek should pay. The lease was clear. The fire department had a report, and I had literal photo evidence of melted Red Bull boxes next to a raccoon crate. If Judge Judy existed in Columbus, I was about to hand her the best episode of her career. Filing the claim was shockingly easy. $50 and a form. I wrote, "Claimant seeks reimbursement for carpet replacement and damages caused by defendant's illegal raccoon." I half expected the clerk to laugh. She didn't even blink, which made me wonder how many raccoon-related cases had passed through before mine. Court day came. I put on my nicest shirt, red, one without raccoon fur residue. Derek actually showed up, wearing his bartender polo like he was heading to work after. He had no lawyer. Neither did I, just vibes. The judge, a tired woman with the energy of someone who has seen humanity's worst Craigslist disputes, listened to my story. She interrupted only once. "Sir, are you saying your roommate kept a raccoon? In a 2-bedroom apartment?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And this raccoon nearly caused a fire?" "Yes." "And you're asking him to pay damages because the raccoon was his?" "Yes." She turned to Derek. He shrugged and said, "He wanted me to get rid of it anyway." That was his defense. Not denial, not justification. Just, he wanted me to get rid of it. Like I was the unreasonable one, asking him not to raise woodland creatures in a lease-violating death trap. The judge rubbed her temples. She asked if Derek had documentation of ownership. He said no. She asked if I had proof the raccoon was his responsibility. I pointed to the fire report with his name and the words, "Roommate kept raccoon in room. Caused incident." In the end, she awarded me $400 out of the $650 I'd paid for carpet damages. Not full justice, but enough to feel like I'd smacked Derek with a tiny legal raccoon of my own. Collecting the money was a whole new ordeal. Derek, shocker, did not pay voluntarily. I had to go through collections, which made me feel like a mobster with paperwork. After months, I finally got a check in the mail. $400, signed with Derek's messy scrawl memo line reading, "For raccoon stuff." I framed the check stub. Sometimes justice is petty, but it's still justice. You'd think that would be the end. Lawsuit settled, carpet replaced, Derek vanished. But Mr. Peanut's shadow lingered in the building long after he left. Neighbors refused to let it go. Someone printed t-shirts with a cartoon raccoon holding a marshmallow on a stick, captioned, "To be fire dept, Raccoon Rescue 2023. They wore them at the building's summer BBQ. Greg the landlord started adding new rules to the lease. No grills, no candles, no exotic animals, including but not limited to raccoons, ferrets, or woodland creatures. The fact that he had to write that down means I changed history. Even deliveries became a running gag. Any package addressed to me would sometimes arrive with "C.O. Mr. Peanut" scrawled in Sharpie. Once, an Amazon driver actually left a box outside with the note, "For raccoon?" The gossip spread beyond the building. Friends of friends would meet me at parties and say, "Oh my God, you're the raccoon guy." Like it was my brand now. I could have been a software sales rep, a trivia nerd, a halfway decent cook. Instead, I was the dude who accidentally harbored an arsonist raccoon. The worst part was Halloween. Someone, I suspect Mrs. Harding's grandson, put a stuffed raccoon on my doormat, holding a lighter taped to its paw. I opened the door in the morning and nearly had a heart attack. It took months before I stopped jumping at scratching noises. For a while, I couldn't even enjoy s'mores because the smell of melted marshmallow made me gag. PTSD, peanut traumatic stress disorder. But here's the kicker. About a year later, Greg told me animal control actually placed Mr. Peanut with a licensed rehabber. Apparently, the little menace was rehabilitated and eventually released into the wild, tagged and tracked. Which means somewhere in Ohio, there's a raccoon roaming free, probably teaching other raccoons how to knock over heat lamps and stage dramatic escapes. A legacy of chaos, my legacy. After the fire, the court case, the memes, and the t-shirts, you'd think I'd move on. I didn't. I became weird about pets, like overly suspicious, to the point where I think I may have traumatized a whole circle of acquaintances by asking too many pointed questions about their animals. Example. A coworker once brought her new puppy into the office. Everyone gathered around, cooing, petting it. I leaned in, squinted, and asked, "So, does it like marshmallows?" She laughed. I didn't. Another time, I went on a date with someone who casually mentioned she had a cat. Instead of saying, "Aw," like a normal person, I asked, "Where exactly do you keep its heat lamp?" She stared at me like I'd confessed to being a lizard. Date over. I started noticing noises in every apartment I visited. Scratching in vents? Must be a ferret. Weird smell? Definitely a raccoon. A neighbor's door propped open with a box of kibble? Obviously the beginning of an exotic animal uprising. For a while, I even considered buying a carbon monoxide detector specifically for wild animal byproducts. Spoiler. That doesn't exist, but I Googled it anyway. Twice. The paranoia wasn't just about animals, though. It seeped into everything. When my new roommate, the succulent grad student, ordered a giant bag of soil for his plants, I interrogated him like a customs officer. This dirt, it's for plants, right? Not like a dirt bath? He blinked at me, then slowly held up his cactus as proof. Even smells became a trigger. Burnt sugar? Nope. Musky dampness? Absolutely not. Popcorn? Weirdly suspicious. I lived in a constant low-level state of, what's hiding under this blanket? I realized I'd officially gone too far when I stayed over at my parents' house for Thanksgiving. They have a dog, an ancient beagle named Max, who mostly sleeps and farts. In the middle of the night, I woke up convinced Max was actually a raccoon in disguise. I stared at him for 10 full minutes until he yawned and rolled over, proving he was, in fact, just a beagle. That's when it hit me. Mr. Peanut had broken me. He wasn't just a raccoon, he was a permanent mental roommate. It's been 2 years since the raccoon incident. Derek is long gone. Greg the landlord has stopped glaring at me in the hall. The scorch mark is gone, replaced with new carpet that looks only slightly less depressing than the old one. Life, technically, has moved on. But I haven't fully. Sometimes, when I'm taking out the trash, I'll hear rustling in the alley. Sometimes, when I open my pantry late at night, I'll think about that first trail in the flour. Sometimes, when I light a candle, I'll glance at it twice, imagining tiny paws knocking it over. Mr. Peanut is out there, somewhere. Released back into the Ohio wilderness, tagged and tracked, probably teaching younger raccoons how to commit arson and shoplift marshmallows. He's a legend now. My cursed legacy. And Derek? I don't know. I haven't seen him. Sometimes I imagine him in another apartment, another Craigslist victim, whispering, "It's just temporary. I'm rescuing it." Maybe it's another raccoon. Maybe it's an opossum this time. Maybe it's something even stranger, like a pygmy goat in a bathtub. All I know is somebody else's smoke alarm is going off soon. As for me, I've learned my lesson. When people ask about my worst roommate, I don't hesitate anymore. I don't say the guy who never did dishes, or the one who played bass at 2 a.m. I say, the one with the raccoon, because that's it. That's the pinnacle. Everything else is just bad manners. Final moral: rent is temporary. Roommates are temporary. But raccoons are forever.